We are the guardians of the Republic. That's how we really see ourselves. And it's important that our country sees us that way also.
I'm Dave Rubin, and joining me on the Rubin Report today are two U.S. combat veterans, one a former member of the U.S. Congress and one a former MMA champion, Colonel Allen West and Chad Robichaux. Welcome to the Rubin Report.
Thanks for having us on.
Thank you, Dave.
I am glad to have you guys here because, as I mentioned to you right before we started, we haven't done enough generally on military and veterans issues and all of those things. So we're going to dive into all that, talk about your nonprofit and why you guys are here together and all of those good things. But first off, what made each of you want to go into the military? Colonel, I'll start with you.
Well, for me, it was a family tradition. We just celebrated the 75th anniversary of D-Day when my father fought in World War II. He was a corporal in the United States Army. He initially started in North Africa, Sicily, Italy, and that's where he was wounded, running supply dispatches. My older brother was a Marine infantryman in Vietnam, wounded at Khe Sanh. And at the age of 15, my dad challenged me to be the first officer in our family. So I went through high school junior ROTC in Atlanta.
What did 15-year-old Allen West think about that?
15-year-old Allen West wanted to, follow his dad's lead. And I think that is why positive, strong role models, male role models, are so important in the black community, because my dad gave me a direction and a goal and objective. So on 31 July 1982 at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, he was on my right shoulder, my mom was on my left shoulder, and they pinned second lieutenant bars on me. And now today, his grandson, dad passed in 1986, but his grandson is a major in the United States Army. So that's 4 generations.
And how many years did you serve?
22.
Long time, yeah. Chad, what about you?
Well, third-generation Marine Corps family. My father served as a combat Marine in Vietnam as an infantryman, and my son is now in Afghanistan right now, part of 3rd Anglico, supporting the Georgians in Afghanistan. So, and I was a Marine as well with 8 deployments to Afghanistan. So my father being a Marine, probably suffered with a lot of things that we help our warriors with at our foundation. And he came home, he was an angry guy, a lot of alcohol and physical abuse, and so I grew up in a very dysfunctional home. I had a brother that was a year older than me, and when we were about 13 and 14 years old, we decided we were going to join the military to escape that life. And so we started running and swimming and teamed up to prepare for that that goal in life. And unfortunately, about a year after that, my brother was shot and killed. And so it put me in what I had left of a family dissolved. It put me in an extreme isolation, and in that isolation, I just continued to focus towards that goal of being in the military. And when I was 17 years old, I met a Marine Corps recruiter named Staff Sergeant Brown, who I wasn't going to graduate high school. I was living on my own by that time, and I wanted to be in some type of special operations, and I expressed to him, what I wanted to do, and he told me about being a reconnaissance Marine, so I set my sights on that, and so the Marine Corps for me, joining at 17 years old, was a clean slate of life, a brand new chance, and at that young age, I was aware enough to embrace it, and it's been an amazing part of my life.
Yeah, what do you think the regular people that don't serve, who love America? You can see I've got a giant American flag in the control room. We've got another one right over there. We've got the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence in there. What do you think that regular Americans should know about you guys, people that serve, that maybe we don't know?
Well, one, I don't think people often realize how special it is for someone who serves in the military. Currently, we only have 0.5% of our population in the United States serves in the military, and stands in the gap, not just to protect the freedoms that we have in America, but to protect the interests of others around the world and stand up for people that can't stand up for themselves. That's one of the things I always loved about the military, and I think people don't understand is the fact that we do serve as strength for the world, not just our nation, and are able to protect these people around the world that don't have the ability to defend themselves.
Yeah, we're going to get into some of the policy parts of that. What do you think we should know about you guys that maybe we don't?
I think the most important thing, and my Christian faith is very strong in my life. When you go to John chapter 15, verse 13, where it says that no greater love has another man that he would lay down his life for another. And then also in Isaiah 6 and 8, when Isaiah is there with the host of the Lord, and they're saying, whom shall we send? Who will go for us? And Isaiah says, here am I, send me. You have to understand that the freedoms and liberties that we have here in the United States of America is that because we consistently raise generations of these young men and women that are going to continue to give that last full measure of devotion. And that's why Abraham Lincoln talked about the increased devotion that a nation should have for those in the Gettysburg Address. And so when people come up and say, thank you for your service, I mean, that's all fine and well. But I think the real tribute and the real honor to people like Chad, myself, and all the generations that have worn the uniform is we want you to understand why we took an oath to support and defend the Constitution.
Do you guys think that there is a little rebirth of that happening right now? Because it's not a coincidence that I put the flag there in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. I don't think it's a coincidence that as people have watched me sort of evolve politically and talk about these things and pride in the country and those things. I don't mean blind pride. I mean, you know, really understanding where we came from and where we're going. I do see a rebirth of that now. Are you seeing that?
I am, and I said this just recently at a speaking event. I think when people turn on the news, they think, you know, the country's lost its way, but that's just, I think there's a loud and voiced, and the loud few. When I go around the country and speak about the work that we do and supporting our warriors, I get to witness firsthand a grateful nation of Americans who are patriots. They love their warriors, they love their country, and they would kind of have the same views that you have, that it's a special place and it's a sacred place that we need to uphold the values that we have in this nation.
Yeah, I know you have no love lost for the mainstream media, but do you think that it partially is that they've sort of gone so bananas in making it seem that America is so evil and we're patriarchal and racist and all these ridiculous things that eventually you push good people to say, whoa. Yeah. No, we're not, and that's actually good.
No, and it is. I don't think that, you know, it was so interesting, you and I were talking off camera how you said 5 or 6 years ago you thought I was a nut.
I thought you were the bad guy, man.
and now we're sitting here having a great conversation.
Yeah.
And I think all of us, if we really understand the objective truths about this country, we come to realize what America really is. It's a beacon of liberty, freedom, and democracy. That's why people come here. When I lived in South Florida, I never saw anyone get on a boat to go to Cuba. I saw the opposite. Right. No one is leaving.
They don't leave. They
don't leave Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras to go to Venezuela. So, you know, this is a very simple thing. So when you have someone like a Governor Cuomo that stands up and says, you know, America has never been great, tell that to those men who 75 years ago landed on those beaches in Normandy and jumped in, you know, the night prior. Tell that to your dad and my older brother who fought in those jungles in Vietnam. Tell that to my dad. Go to his, you know, final resting spot. A man that fought for this country when this country did not afford him all those rights and privileges it did others, but yet he wanted his son to still be an officer in that exact same army. That's America. That's what it's all about, Dave.
So how do you balance that, which I think we obviously all agree with that also we do make mistakes. Also, we're flawed. Also, depending on political leadership, there might be times when you're really all gung-ho about all of our policies, and sometimes you're not.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a nation, we are going to, we are, like you said, you don't have people leaving to go to Cuba. I mean, we have a line from Guatemala to San Diego for people to come here, and they're coming here for a reason. It's not just for free health care and college. They're coming here because of this land of opportunity. It still is, and I pray it always will. It will be. But we're not going to do things right all the time. We're not going to have leaders that are always going to make the right decisions. But I believe America as an institution, the great experiment of America is something that still stands true, and it's the reason why the world looks towards us. And America as a nation and as a military, the strength of that makes the world a better place.
What do you think it is fundamentally about the military that allows it to keep America strong despite having administrations that can wildly go in different directions? I mean, just look at the last two. The policies of Barack Obama versus the policies of Donald Trump are vastly different, but we haven't had a coup. No. You know, the military is still functioning, still doing its job. Where does that strength come from?
Well, if you go and you read the Constitution, the founding fathers talked about moving toward a more perfect union. So we're not a perfect country, but we understand that we have a foundation, we have a fundamental, values, we have a rule of law that enables us to move in that direction. That's how we continue to amend ourselves. And that's the interesting thing about our military, Dave, is that we don't take an oath to a political party. We don't take an oath to a person. We take an oath to that document that, I'm carrying right here that unifies us as a nation. That's our rule of law. That's our standard. And so our military is focused on that and nothing more. And we are the guardians of the republic. That's how we really see ourselves. And it's important that our country sees us that way also. So no, we're not going to go in and throw a coup because one administration to the others. But, you know, maybe there are going to be some orders that are not exactly ethical that we will stand up and challenge. And that's why we have these generals, and that's what we expect them to do as the members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. But we take that oath to the Constitution, and I think that's important.
So let's talk a little bit about your service specifically. So you served in Afghanistan and you served in Iraq. You know, Afghanistan seems to me to be the weirdest military adventure or war, whatever you want to call it at this point, because it's the longest ongoing war that we've ever had in the United States.
Yes.
It's still going on now. People seem to be very confused as to why we went in the first place. Why are we still there? Sort of break that down.
Well, I think that I feel a lot clearer, more clear about Afghanistan and why we went there. I mean,
Great.
September 11th, you know, planes were flown into World Trade Center. And it was done so by the Taliban, and we had an obligation to go and hunt down Osama bin Laden and the Taliban that were responsible for it. And part of that meant to align with the Northern Alliance, which would have been Massoud would have been the leader of the Northern Alliance, which bin Laden cleverly killed at the same time, assassinated at the same time. And so as we went into Afghanistan, we had to, you know, not just go after one person, but we had to go the infiltration of Afghanistan by the Taliban, occupation of that. And so going after the Taliban meant a occupying of Afghanistan, not to overtake the country, but to eradicate the Taliban. And obviously that's still going on 20 years later. I would have never thought after 8 deployments there, my son would be there fighting the Taliban right now.
So is that a failure of our policy? Is there an inconsistency between administrations there?
Yeah.
What do you think that is?
Well, I mean, you got to think 8 years, for 8 years of doing this, of that 20 years, the military was completely handcuffed. They were cut resources, manpower, and rules of engagement that were not favorable to our troops. And
so you're talking about the Obama years.
I'm talking about the Obama administration at the cost of many American lives, and I truly believe that the administration is responsible for that. And luckily now the rules of engagement have changed, and we're able to go after and more offensively go after the Taliban, and I think we're having a more effective footprint there. However, I think Americans should understand that we're not there in the same capacity we was in the early days. We're there to support the ANA, the Afghan National Army. We're there to support other allied forces, such as my son right now is assigned to the Georgians, who are out doing combat patrols and presence patrols. So we're there in more of a support and advise capacity right now.
Yeah.
And I think even with my son there, I'd love him to come home, but I think we belong there in that capacity to support, advise, and help foreign nations, because these nations like the ANA, they can't. If we left the ANA, Afghan National Army, to do this themselves, they would fail.
So that actually is a good segue to talking about Iraq, because one of the things that happened in Iraq, you served in Desert Storm, but after this last Iraq war, you know, there was this big debate: when do we leave? And basically, Obama took us out with just announcing the day we're going, and they were having free and fair elections. There was actually the beginnings of a democracy there. Now, you could argue that we maybe should have never been there in the first place. You could argue that we had to leave no matter what, all those things. But democracy was spreading, and then we left, and now it's gotten much worse.
Yes.
So actually, first, why don't you talk about Desert Storm, just in general? Because that's the forgotten one now, because people only think about this second Iraq war.
You know, it's incredible that has happened, and one of the committees I sit on is to establish a National Desert Storm War Memorial in Washington, D.C., and so, because it has been forgotten. But it was an important bridge from us coming from Vietnam to, once again, reestablish that respect and regard for our military. But there will never be another Desert Storm. No one is ever going to take on the United States of America in a wide open desert of conventional warfare. You know, two of the best training facilities for our military is right here in California, 290 Palms, and then also the National Training Center. We are experts in open desert warfare, and the Iraqi Army learned that in 96 short hours. But the real thing was that we built a coalition. We, you know, held to the objective that we were going in under the United Nations mandate. It was to get the Iraqis out of Kuwait. But what you have seen metastasize emphasize now is a world that understands you don't fight the United States of America, up front, face to face. Now you have this ideological war against Islamic jihadism. They don't wear uniforms. They don't openly declare themselves. They are non-state, non-uniform belligerents, and that's what Chad had to deal with in Afghanistan. And even after I retired, I was in Afghanistan for 2.5 years as a civilian military advisor down in Kandahar. We have not done a good job of understanding this modern battlefield, understanding this enemy that we're facing. Even Russia, when they went into the Crimea, they didn't go in as the Russian military. Mm-hmm. They went as a paramilitary force, and you see what they're doing in Ukraine. China, when you look at what they're doing all over the globe, they do say that this is our strategy, the One Belt, One Road, but they are covertly doing things that we don't understand. China is in Venezuela, as a matter of fact. Iran, the #1 state sponsor of Islamic terrorism in the world. But, Hezbollah is not out there really, declaring they're a state or what have you. And ISIS.
Well, they are flying their flags in London.
They're flying a flag, but, Hezbollah doesn't have a country. And so I think that the incredible thing, I got to be at the tactical level. And then also I got to be at the strategic level, having sat on the House Armed Services Committee. And just the same in Vietnam, we lose strategically. We don't lose tactically on the ground. It's at that level with the policies and everything where we make some really dumb decisions, rules of engagement, not understanding the enemy, their goals and objectives, that, it filters down and we set our warriors up not for success. And I think that's what we have to learn.
What do you make of the fact that George H.W. Bush, there's sort of the famous moment where he decided not to go to Baghdad, not to topple Saddam the first time around. He was obviously under pressure from more of the neocon types to take Saddam out at that point. The irony being that we left Saddam and then his son ended up going in, 15 years later or so. What was it like to be there when that decision
it was incredible.
was made or not made, depending on which way you want to look at it?
Yeah, because I was in the 1st Infantry Division, and we were the ones that had secured Safwan Airfield for the peace negotiation talks to come in. And we just sat there that night and said, man, okay, so Major, Lieutenant Colonel, when do you think we'll be back? Because anytime you fight half-measure warfare, you have ongoing residual consequences. I mean, you look at the Korean War, you look at the Vietnam War. The last time we fought a total war was World War II, when we wanted the enemy to capitulate. I mean, they signed a document of surrender. We don't have that today.
So you believe in the Powell Doctrine, basically, that if you're going to do it, you
got to do it right.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, and that's what Karl von Clausewitz talked about. He said, war is about imposing your will upon another. You don't do half will. Now, with Desert Shield, Desert Storm, we would have lost credibility, though, if we had continued on. But I think that we did not do a good job of degrading the complete capacity and capability militarily of Saddam Hussein, because we had the Republican Guard divisions just right ahead of us. We could have taken those guys out and maybe brought him to an even better position at the table. But
do you think the military brass wanted to?
I don't know if they wanted to.
Or at least the people there?
I think the thing is we kind of felt we didn't seal the deal, and we kind of knew that eventually we'd come back. But even more so, we could have done better with the Kurds. I really feel that we continue to kind of, backslap the Kurds when they are so pro-American and they so want to be an ally of ours. And what we have done with ISIS couldn't have done without the Kurds.
Yeah. Is that just one of those situations where Iraq really is 3 countries?
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, I suppose we could impose some sort of partition and give the Kurds what they justly deserve. That then will probably make Turkey rain hell on them and a whole bunch of other things.
Well, Turkey is not exactly our friends under Erdogan, but if you go back post-World War I, the Sykes-Picot Treaty, when the great powers of England and France went in, they just divided the Middle East up arbitrarily, just the same as you saw in Africa. They didn't pay attention to tribal allegiances or what have you. They created artificial nations.
The lines actually look ridiculous.
If
you really look at them, the shapes and all of these things are just
So I
insane.
think that there's an opportunity now for us to maybe look at how can the Middle East be restructured. I mean, the Kurds are the nation's largest ethnic group without a homeland. And I think that they have suffered, from increased persecution. I think that they could be more friendly to, the Syrian Christians, the Chaldeans, who are also persecuted. And so I think that that's where we don't do strategy in long terms. We do strategy in election cycles, Dave.
Yeah.
And you can't win.
That's just the part of this that probably never changes. That almost screws up everything.
And it does screw up everything. Because you can't win against people that are thinking in 50 and 100 years cycles.
So with all that in mind, if we look at Afghanistan today, and now you're saying some of the rules of engagement have changed, we're doing things a little more effectively, how do we eventually not be in Afghanistan? Is there any road that you can see to getting us there, Dad?
I don't think there's any successful road to a complete, full withdrawal. I think we probably will maintain a base there, maybe a Brockman base, and continue to support in this advisory role. I tell you, so I have to say this: my capacity in Afghanistan was much different than the conventional troop. I was a Force Recon Marine. I had the unique opportunity to try out for a JSOC, a Joint Special Operations Command Task Force, and so the capacity I worked in was, I didn't live on a base. I lived out with the Afghan people. I was embedded with the Afghan people and wore civilian clothes, and so I lived in their homes and ate dinner with their families and played soccer with their kids.
What did they think about you guys?
Well, this is the point. They loved the fact that America was there because they had been truly oppressed by the Taliban, and so I got when I first went, I deployed like every other warrior after 9/11. We were going there to right the wrongs of 9/11. That's a very patriotic cause. That's what motivated us. But very quickly, I went from that to understanding what these people had endured from the Taliban, to see their hurt and their pain and what the Taliban had done to the women and the little kids, the little boys and little girls, and seeing this and hearing about stories and understanding this, it really turned my heart from this patriotic sense of retaliate for 9/11 to these people are oppressed and we need to be there to help these people. And this is where I'm torn today because I still have a heart for these people. I mean, I lost Afghan brothers in combat. And so I still have a heart for these people and I couldn't imagine. I was there for the 2004 election. I remember sitting in the living room. Everyone's like a Super Bowl party. Everyone's tuned in TV because John Kerry and Bush is up, and everyone, these guys, these people were having, there's food everywhere. They're having this giant party. I never seen anything like, no one in the United States excited for a presidential election like this was. And when Bush won, they were so excited because they were so terrified that if Kerry won, he would withdraw the U.S. troops and what would happen to them. They know what will happen to them if we leave. And so it really changed my perspective on being there. Again, as a father now, and I'm like, does my son belong there? It made me ask these questions all over again. But I do believe that we don't belong there in a conventional capacity, but as a support and advisory role, I do believe we still belong there.
So with that in mind, what is a sound policy then? What is a sound foreign policy that you can do some good? You can try to build the, not nation build per se, but
I was just going to say
but try to set the seeds of democracy and freedom, which we were doing in Iraq, which we're doing in Afghanistan, but make sure that we don't become the imperial empire that is there forever.
We don't want to be mired down.
So what do you think, just broadly, because we're sort of talking about this at a personal level from your perspective, what do you think broadly just a sane foreign policy looks like?
Well, that's the key thing. It should not be about nation building. It should be about, strike operations. It is about having a force that is able to make sure that these Islamic jihadists are not able to have a defined sanctuary, a base of operations. And what we have been doing up to this point, Dave, we've been playing whack-a-mole. And you can't win playing whack-a-mole. So what we need to be able to do is, instead of having this massive forward deployed military, you have a power projection platform. And so you have, a Bagram, you have a base, somewhere close in Iraq where you can launch troops very quickly, and you have a strike operation. You hit a critical capability capacity of the enemy, and, then you pull back. But you stay in that very basic region to let them know that we can quickly respond once again. And that's what you just saw when we brought in the carrier group into the Persian Gulf area to stand up against Iran, to say that we do have a credible military deterrent. So your foreign policy is worthless unless you have that deterrent. And they teach you in staff college about the 4 elements of national power: diplomatic, informational, military, and economic. And I think that what we have to do is continue to use the diplomatic, the informational, the economic means first and foremost. But we have to show that, if push comes to shove, we can do this if you're not willing to
So with that in mind, do you regard the Obama red line in Syria as just like the biggest blunder of 30 years? Because I remember I was a lefty at the time. You can watch videos of me on the Young Turks. I was saying we should not be there. I was saying they've got to take care of it, or the regional actors have to take care of it. Let Turkey help some of these people. Like, I did not want anything to do with it. I was completely anti-war. But then once Obama said the red line thing, I was like, all right, well, if you've set the deal here, then you have to follow through. Do you view that as just, I don't know, has there been a worse blunder, let's say just a policy?
Well, you lose all credibility whatsoever. And then people see you as a joke. I mean, when you come out and you say ISIS is just a JV team, then you're saying that I'm dismissing this thing. When you deal with someone like Kim Jong-un saying we're going to have strategic patience, well, the guy keeps shooting off rockets and missiles and everything like that. So, compromise, appeasement, negotiation, things like that. There are people in the world that only understand strength and might. And Chad and I, we've seen those type of people. We understand that. Anything else is deemed as weakness. So when you draw a red line, then all of a sudden you say, well, it wasn't really my red line. It was everybody else's red line. Leaders take responsibility. And that's what, you fail to see then. Now we have someone that has come in. He's saying, okay, rules of engagement got to change. You generals, you go in, you take care, you do what has to be done. We don't hear about ISIS. Now, they still exist as an ideological enemy, but they don't have a territorial integrity. You have China that is now saying, what is going on here? I mean, we just had the run of the mill for all of these years, Republican or Democrat president. Now something has changed. North Korea, the same thing. Even Russia is starting to be concerned. So I think that's the important thing is, you have to be able to come out with that stick when it is required, when it is necessary. And if you create a void, like President Obama did in Iraq, someone's going to fill that void. That's a law of physics.
So I think we got some hints as to what Colonel West thinks about Trump's policy, foreign policy. What do you think?
Well, I think, all four areas that you're talking about, particularly in the economic sanctions right now. I mean, a lot of people, continue to, every time the president says something that he's going to impose tariffs or do economic sanctions, people laugh and mock him. But it turns around weeks later,
But then Mexico
again.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think he keeps pushing these things, both military strategy, diplomacy, and economic, and you're seeing him win in these areas. And it's becoming hard to doubt the president.
Yeah. What do you think about his decision-making abilities when it comes to selecting certain people? So I remember, like, when Bolton got put in, it was like, all right, now Trump's going all neocon, and the base, which was very anti-war, was very pissed. And I remember sort of thinking, well, it's like, that doesn't mean you're going neocon because you bring a guy like him around. It actually means you're bringing somebody around that is known as a threat. And that kind of keeps the enemies going, we don't, and then you have Trump who says anything. So it's kind of like, wait a minute, the combo here is a guy who we think likes war or who does like war, let's say, or however you want to phrase that, plus a guy like Trump who says whatever he wants. Now we don't know how to react, basically.
And that is the thing. No one understands that decision cycle. So people are completely off base. They don't know what is going to come out, in the morning. They're sitting around and say, okay, what is he going to tweet now? And in the Marine Corps, because I did 3 years on exchange with the Marines, they call it the OODA loop. And what you want to do is to be able to get inside the enemy's decision cycle, and you want to completely throw them off their game. And that's what President Trump has done. You're not.
You think he really gets that at a military level, or is that just that thing that he gets?
Yeah, it's just a thing. I don't know if it's a New York thing.
It might be. Well, I think it's sort of. I always say it's sort of like he's just kind of, and I don't even mean this. I don't even mean this negatively necessarily, but he's kind of just a crooked New York businessman. But you got to do a lot of stuff within that.
Do a lot of stuff.
We got to do a lot of stuff within that to make things happen because the whole system is out of whack.
And see, a normal politician is going to follow what everyone says. Okay, you got to do X, you got to do Y, you got to do Z. I mean, they got this set battle scheme or whatever. And he just has completely thrown that playbook out, and folks aren't used to that. He is not predictable. And really, on the battlefield, you don't want to be predictable. No. And this is a battlefield. This is an economic battlefield. It's a diplomatic battlefield. It's a military battlefield. And he is just completely outmaneuvering our major adversaries, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea.
The world's in a better place because of it right now.
Do you think that's empirically true? I mean, if you listen to the media, it sounds like, any moment World War III is going to happen, where something's going down with China, Iran's going to get the bomb, this, that, the other thing. Right. But do you really feel that there's empirical proof that actually things are safer or more stable?
Well, I mean, we have, what's North Korea going to do, what's Iran going to do. We have no way to predict what they're going to do. But I think the actions that the president and the administration has proven that they are responding to. I mean, North Korea has responded in a way that we never thought they would respond with the relations to the United States. Iran has backed down. Mexico, who's really taken advantage of the United States over for many years, is finally coming around. I mean, these things may seem extreme because people aren't used to it, but I think I believe the world is in a better place right now.
Yeah. Think about this, Dave. The president said, "I do not want to see people dropping bombs on innocent women and children," and he bombed Syria. Now, from a tactical level, you look at the battle damage assessment, it was not really a big thing. But the fact that he took the action, that was the most important thing. I mean, when Iran starts to maybe do a little saber rattling, he doesn't, get back on his heels. He says, send a carrier battle group and let's show them that, we'll go toe to toe. You're not going to see sailors on a riverine assault boat on their knees at gunpoint because of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Navy. That ain't happening.
Right, which we saw.
Yeah. And every American, you talked about the flag, every American should have been incensed that we had sailors who surrendered instead of fought and were on their knees at gunpoint to the Iranians.
No. Well, that must be why Trump won it. Within 2 months of being elected, he dropped that mother of all bombs, and people were like, "Oh, now he's going all war hawk." No. But your argument would be he did it because it's like you show a little bit of erratic behavior.
But you show strength too, and that keeps these guys on their heels.